This is incredible, the kid is only 12 years old.
In a quiet corner of a bustling city, a 12-year-old boy named Caleb finds his greatest joy not on a sports field, but in the luminous glow of an old computer screen. He dreams of a future in software development, a world of logic and creation that promises a way to lift his family out of hardship. But when a routine visit to his father's friend's office turns into a high-stakes catastrophe, Caleb's quiet ambition is put to the ultimate test, forcing him to prove that a true architect of dreams can be found in the most unexpected of places. At this age, would he solve the problem better than even the engineers and make his family proud, or would he mess everything up and be harshly criticized? If you liked the video and have subscribed to my channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. The hum of the city was a constant lullaby, a sound Caleb knew better than any nursery rhyme. From the window of his family's third-floor apartment, the street below was a vibrant, moving tapestry of people and cars, each on a journey of their own. For 12-year-old Caleb, his own journey was just beginning, and it felt like it was starting with a single, glowing screen. Caleb's world was a microcosm of efficiency. His family's apartment, while not spacious, was meticulously organized. Every object had a purpose, a place. It was a philosophy his mother, a nursing assistant with hands that moved with a surgeon's precision, and his father, a dedicated long-haul truck driver, had instilled in him. They taught him that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in discipline, hard work, and the smart use of what you had. These lessons, woven into the fabric of his everyday life, resonated deeply with Caleb. He saw the logic in it, the clear cause and effect, the same kind of logic that would one day draw him into the world of software. At school, Caleb was more than just a good student. He was a scholar in a quest. He didn't just absorb information, he sought to understand its underlying structure. Mathematics wasn't about numbers on a page but about the elegant patterns and rules that govern them. Science was a thrilling detective story, with each experiment a clue leading to a greater truth. His teachers often commented on his insatiable curiosity and his quiet, focused determination. They saw a spark in his eyes that promised something more than academic success. They saw a budding innovator. The spark became a fire a little over a year ago. It was a rainy Saturday when his father came home with a surprise. A boxy beige computer tower, its monitor a thick, convex slab of glass. It was old, a relic from a time before sleek laptops and tablets, but to Caleb, it was a treasure chest. Found it on the side of the road, his father had said, wiping a streak of rain from his brow. Thought you might be able to get it working. The challenge was all Caleb needed. He spent the next 2 weeks in a state of pure immersion. The family's small, round kitchen table became his workshop. He unscrewed the casing, revealing a motherboard that looked like a futuristic city grid, with tiny components standing in for skyscrapers. He researched every error message, every cryptic beep, using the public library's computers. He learned about RAM hard drives and the boot sequence. It was a puzzle of the most intricate kind, and solving it felt more rewarding than winning any video game. When he finally got the computer to power on and display the Windows XP desktop, he felt an exhilarating rush of accomplishment. It was his first successful build, a digital victory forged from junk. This small success was a gateway. Once the machine was working, he didn't stop. He found old, dusty programming books at a used bookstore and began to teach himself to code. Python was his first love. Its clean syntax and powerful functionality were a revelation. He started with simple scripts, a program that would calculate the area of a circle, then a rudimentary guessing game. With each successful run, the code felt less like a foreign language and more like a tool, a brush to paint on a digital canvas. He discovered the immense satisfaction of creating something out of pure thought, of translating an idea into a functional reality. For Caleb, software development was more than just a hobby. It was a dream that felt tangible, a path that could lead to a better future. He saw the struggles his parents faced, the long hours and the physical toll of their jobs. He wanted to build something that could ease their burdens, something that could provide for them and allow them to rest. His dream was not just to be a software developer, but to be an architect of solutions, to use his mind to build a life of comfort and security for his family. He envisioned himself in a sleek, modern office, surrounded by screens displaying lines of code, the quiet hum of servers his new lullaby. One evening, while Caleb was debugging a simple text-based adventure game he was building, his father walked in, holding a steaming mug of tea. He watched for a moment, his face a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. "Still at it?" his father asked, his voice low and tired. Caleb looked up, a bright smile on his face. "Almost done, Dad. Just a small logic error." His father sat down across from him, the steam from the mug fogging the glass of the monitor. "You know, my old friend, Mr. Thompson, he's a big deal at that tech company, Vidian Dynamics. He's a senior software engineer." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He knew about Mr. Thompson. His father spoke of him with great respect. He was the kind of man who built things, not with his hands but with his mind. "He called today," his father continued, taking a slow sip. "He said if we're ever in the area we should stop by his office. He said he could show you around, give you a look at what the pros do. What do you say?" Caleb's gaze snapped from the screen to his father. The world around him seemed to slow down. This wasn't just an offer, it was a beacon, a confirmation that his dreams, once confined to a dusty old computer, were real and possible. It was a chance to step into the world he had only imagined. "Yes," Caleb said, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "Yes, please." A wide grin spread across his father's face. "Okay then. We'll go tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word hung in the air, electric with possibility. Caleb looked back at his screen, at the lines of code that had become his second language. They felt different now, more purposeful. They were no longer just a hobby. They were a key waiting to unlock a future he was finally close enough to touch. He could hardly sleep that night, his mind buzzing with a mix of excitement and anticipation. The journey he had started on his own was about to take its first major turn, and he was ready. The next morning arrived with a nervous energy that hummed in the air, a feeling Caleb knew well from the eve of a big test. He wore his best pair of jeans and a freshly ironed collared shirt, an outfit that felt both too formal and not formal enough for the occasion. His father, dressed in a clean polo shirt and slacks, looked more relaxed but shared the same quiet excitement. Their journey across the city was a quiet one, a mix of the usual bus clatter and the silent, weighty anticipation of stepping into a new world. Vidian Dynamics was located in a sleek, glass and steel building that seemed to scrape the clouds. It was a stark contrast to the red brick and weathered facades of Caleb's neighborhood. The logo, a stylized V in a loop of binary code, glowed subtly above the entrance. When they stepped into the lobby, the noise of the city vanished. The air was cool and smelled faintly of fresh coffee. The floor was polished marble, reflecting the high ceiling and a large, abstract sculpture that dominated the space. It felt less like an office and more like a museum dedicated to the future. Caleb's father approached the front desk, and a few minutes later, a tall man with a friendly, wrinkled face and a warm smile came to greet them. This was Mr. Thompson, a man Caleb had only heard about in his father's stories, a kind of living legend. He was dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, a look that surprised Caleb, who had pictured a suit and tie. He had a way of moving that was both relaxed and purposeful, a rhythm that suggested he was always thinking, always solving. "James?" Mr. Thompson said, clasping Caleb's father's hand. "It's been too long. And this must be the prodigy you told me about." He turned his attention to Caleb, his eyes twinkling. "Caleb, a pleasure to meet you, son. Welcome to the engine room." Caleb's throat felt a little tight. "Thank you for having me, sir." "Please call me Michael," Mr. Thompson said, his smile never faltering. "And don't be shy. Ask as many questions as you like. We're pretty light on staff today, so you'll get a good look around without a lot of distractions." Michael led them past the front desk and through a secured glass door. The open-plan office stretched out before them, a panorama of desks, monitors, and ergonomic chairs. It was quiet. Too quiet. A few people were scattered here and there, their heads bent over screens, but the vibrant, bustling energy Caleb had imagined was absent. The desks of senior engineers were noticeably empty, with keyboards and mugs left untouched. Caleb felt a pang of disappointment, but his father nudged him, a silent reminder to be polite. As they walked, Michael gestured to different areas. "This is our design department," he said, pointing to a section with large, drawing tablets and vibrant monitors. "This is where our user interfaces are born. The look and feel of our applications." He then led them to a quieter corner. "And over here, this is the nerve center. Our core development team. The heart of our operation." Caleb's eyes darted from screen to screen, trying to make sense of the code he saw. It was more complex than the simple scripts he wrote. He saw lines of Python, JavaScript, and other languages he hadn't yet studied. He noticed a few engineers who seemed to be younger, their faces etched with the kind of strained concentration he recognized from his own late-night debugging sessions. They didn't have the relaxed, confident air that he imagined a senior engineer would have. He caught a snippet of their conversation. They were discussing a problem in a way that felt hesitant, uncertain. "Where are the rest of the engineers?" Caleb's father asked, his voice low. "Ah, yes," Michael said, a faint wrinkle appearing on his brow. "It's an unusual day. We had a mandatory company-wide off-site training planned for the whole week. It's part of a new initiative to roll out some updated protocols. So the whole senior team is at a retreat a few hours away. We have some junior and a few mid-level engineers holding down the fort, but it's not ideal. The timing couldn't be worse, really?" He shook his head slightly as if to dismiss the thought. The tour continued. Michael pointed out the break room, the Zen garden with its fake plants and comfortable chairs, and a large whiteboard covered in diagrams and scribbled notes that looked like a secret language. Caleb was mesmerized. He didn't just see a company, he saw a symphony of logic, a massive, collaborative effort to build and maintain the digital tools that people used every day. He felt a profound sense of belonging, a strong feeling that this was where he was meant to be. They circled back to Michael's desk, which was a tidy space dominated by 3 large monitors displaying lines of code. Michael gestured for Caleb to sit in the chair. "Have a look around," he said. "Poke around the code on the open screen if you like. It's just a sandbox environment, nothing critical." Caleb sat down, his heart thumping. The keyboard felt different, more responsive. The mouse glided smoothly. He looked at the code, a jumble of functions and variables, and for a moment, it was overwhelming. But then he remembered the lessons from his own small programs. The way code was simply a set of instructions, a story told in a precise language. He began to trace the logic, to follow the paths of the variables as they moved through the program. He wasn't just looking at text anymore, he was seeing the invisible architecture, the blueprint of a digital world. Michael and Caleb's father stood off to the side, chatting quietly about old times. They looked at Caleb, a small figure in a large chair, completely absorbed. The quiet of the office seemed to deepen, amplifying the soft clicks of Caleb's mouse and keyboard. The moment was perfect, a snapshot of a dream realized, a future already within his reach. Little did any of them know that this peaceful, silent moment was the calm before a digital storm. Just then the phone on Michael's desk rang, a sharp, jarring sound in the quiet space. He picked it up, his expression shifting from relaxed to concerned. "What? All of them?" he said, his voice dropping. He listened for a long moment, his eyes wide. Okay, get me on a video call with the rest of the team now. I'll be right there." He hung up the phone, his face pale. The peaceful calm in the office was about to be shattered, and Caleb, sitting at the heart of it all, was about to be swept into the storm. The serene quiet of the office shattered with the force of a thunderclap. Michael's face, a moment ago so placid, was a mask of sheer terror. His call with the team was a frantic series of clipped commands and panicked questions. As he spoke, his eyes darted from screen to screen, watching a series of red alerts cascade across the main dashboard monitors that hung from the ceiling. Caleb and his father stood frozen, bystanders to a catastrophe they could not yet comprehend. "The payment gateway is offline." A voice boomed from Michael's computer, a disembodied panic transmitted through the small speakers. "We're losing millions of transactions a minute. It's a cascade failure and the rollback isn't working." Michael slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing in the silent office. "Get on the phones. Start manually processing the highest priority clients. And find the source of that API failure now," he bellowed, his usual calm gone. The handful of junior engineers who had been quietly working in their cubicles, now scrambled, their faces ashen. They moved with a panicked haste that was the opposite of the smooth, controlled efficiency Caleb had admired just moments before. The peaceful silence was replaced by a symphony of frantic keyboard clicks, rapid-fire conversations, and the rising crescendo of a company on the brink. Caleb's father, seeing the shift in atmosphere, gently put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Caleb, maybe we should leave. This is a lot." But Caleb didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the main dashboard, where a glowing red line on a graph plunged vertically, representing a catastrophic drop in network traffic. Alarms blared, not from speakers but from the system itself, a series of shrill beeps and flashing icons that screamed of failure. Overhearing the conversations, Caleb pieced together the fragments of the problem. Vidian Dynamics' primary revenue stream, a critical e-commerce system that handled millions of daily transactions, was failing. The API that communicated between the customer-facing website and the company's internal payment gateway was returning a series of inexplicable errors. The system was now hemorrhaging money, and every passing second was a disaster. The engineers on duty were young, their knowledge broad but lacking the deep, specialized expertise of the absent senior staff. They huddled together, shouting out theories, pulling up code and running diagnostics. Their stress was palpable, a thick cloud of anxiety that seemed to choke the very air. They were looking for a complex, obscure bug, a needle in a digital haystack, because that's what major system failures usually were. They were so focused on the big picture, the failing network, the crashing servers, that they were missing the small, foundational details. They were trying to rebuild a skyscraper when the single cornerstone had crumbled. As the chaos mounted, Caleb instinctively stepped away from his father and towards the cluster of screens. His father hesitated, then, seeing the focused intensity in Caleb's eyes, decided to wait, trusting his son's quiet genius. Caleb didn't speak. He just watched, his mind a quiet island in a sea of noise. He saw one young engineer, his hands trembling, pull up a large block of code on a secondary monitor. Caleb didn't understand the entire code base, but he knew Python. His eyes scanned the lines, looking for something familiar, a syntax error, a logic flaw, anything. He saw it, not immediately but after a few moments of patient, methodical scanning. There, buried deep in a nested function, was a simple logic error. A variable, meant to hold a temporary string, had been declared with the same name as a critical global variable that controlled the loop for processing the transactions. The temporary variable was being overwritten by an empty string at a crucial moment, causing the loop to go into an infinite cycle, which in turn was creating a memory leak and crashing the entire process. It was a classic beginner's mistake, the kind he had made dozens of times in his own small projects before he learned the importance of clear variable naming and scope. It was a single, misplaced line, a subtle but deadly flaw that had been missed by everyone looking for something far more complicated. "It's the process understudy variable," Caleb said, his voice a quiet whisper that was barely audible over the din of panic. No one heard him. The engineers were arguing and Michael was on another call, his voice strained and desperate. Caleb raised his voice a little, but still no one paid him any mind. He was just a kid, a civilian in the middle of a war room. Frustrated but determined, Caleb walked directly to Michael's side. He waited for a break in the conversation, and then, with all the courage he could muster, he spoke. "Mr. Michael, sir? I think I know what the problem is." Michael looked down at Caleb, his eyes wide with surprise and a hint of impatience. "Not now, son," he said, trying to be polite, but his mind was clearly on the crisis. "This isn't a game. We're about to have a major systems failure." "I know, sir," Caleb said, his voice firm and steady despite the pounding of his heart. "But I think I found a bug. In the API code, a temporary variable is overriding the global process _ID variable. It's causing an infinite loop. Look at line 147 in the gateway _interface.py file." Michael's brow furrowed. He looked at the young boy, then at the line of code that one of the engineers had pulled up. "That's ridiculous," he muttered, but something in Caleb's unwavering confidence made him pause. He typed the name of the file into the search bar, his fingers flying across the keyboard, and pulled up the code. His eyes, trained by years of experience, scanned the lines. He saw it. The variable declaration. The misplaced line. A simple, stupid mistake. The kind of thing you overlook when you're looking for a distributed systems bug. He looked at Caleb with a newfound awe. "It's an off-site training," Michael said into the video call. "We can't get anyone back here in time. We need to do something now. We have a problem and I have a solution, but it's unorthodox." The CEO's face, projected on a large screen in the center of the room, was haggard. "What is it, Michael? We are losing billions by the minute." Michael hesitated, then with a deep breath he said, "We have a visitor. A boy. 12 years old. He saw the code for a few minutes and thinks he found the error." There was a moment of silence. The CEO's face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Michael, have you lost your mind? We don't have time for jokes. I'm not joking, sir, Michael said, his voice low but firm. I looked at the code. He's right. It's a simple variable scope issue. The kind of thing our senior staff would have caught in seconds, but in the panic, no one saw it. The CEO's face hardened. He looked at the plunging graphs, at the red alerts that were now screaming on every screen. He had a choice: continue with the failing, panicked team, or take a wild, illogical gamble. Do it, he finally said, his voice devoid of emotion. You have 60 seconds. If this doesn't work, you're all fired. With the CEO's permission, Caleb was given an open keyboard and screen, a single chance to right the ship. The other engineers, their faces a mix of skepticism and desperation, watched on. Caleb sat down, his hands trembling for the first time. The weight of the moment was immense. He wasn't just fixing his own small project. He was fixing a massive, complex system with millions of dollars on the line. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and focused on the code. He directed the engineers on what to do. Open the file, gateway_interface.py. Go to line 147. Delete that variable declaration and replace it with this temporary_ID. He typed the correct code, a single line, and pressed enter. The room held its breath. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the red alerts began to flicker, turning from angry crimson to a calming amber. The vertical line on the graph began to stabilize. The silent office let out a collective gasp of relief. Michael looked at Caleb with a look of utter astonishment. The chaos subsided, replaced by a stunned, grateful hush. The digital storm had passed, and the quiet architect had saved the day. The digital roar that had filled the air was replaced by a profound, almost disorienting silence. The red alarms on the screens had all vanished, replaced by a soothing, uniform green. The graph that had been a terrifying vertical plunge now flatlined, a steady, calm line of stable data. The junior engineers, who just moments before were a whirlwind of panicked motion, stood frozen, their mouths agape. They looked at Caleb, then at the screens, their minds struggling to reconcile the simple action of a child with the monumental crisis that had been averted. The first to break the silence was a young man with a shock of red hair, one of the engineers who had been at the forefront of the panic. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and relief. It's stable, he stammered. The loop is gone. The memory leak is gone. We're back online. His voice was a raw, breathless whisper. Soon, the quiet relief became a wave of collective emotion. A few of the engineers slumped into their chairs, their shoulders sagging with the sudden release of tension. Another let out a loud, shuddering breath, the kind that comes after holding it for far too long. They started to gather around Caleb, their faces full of awe and gratitude. They weren't looking at a child anymore, they were looking at a savior. Michael, who had been leaning against a server rack, his face pale and clammy, pushed himself upright. He walked over to Caleb, a man who had seen the brink of professional ruin and had been pulled back by a young boy. He didn't speak. He just placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder, his fingers digging in with a grateful, shaking pressure. His eyes, usually so focused and clear, were wet. "Thank you, Caleb," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what you just did." Caleb, still sitting in the ergonomic chair, felt a strange mix of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. The pounding in his heart had subsided, but his hands were still trembling slightly. He looked up at Michael and simply nodded. He hadn't done it for recognition. He had done it because he saw a problem he knew how to solve. It was a simple, logical fix. He hadn't been thinking about millions of dollars or company failures, just about the elegance of a solution. Just as the room started to breathe again, Michael's phone rang. It was the CEO. Michael answered it, a sense of dread creeping back into his voice. He listened for a moment, then looked at Caleb and his father. "He wants to see us," he said, his voice now calm and respectful. "All of us." They were led down a wide, silent hallway to the executive wing of the building. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. They passed by offices with thick, mahogany doors, each one a testament to the power held within. The door at the very end of the hall was unmarked, a sleek, dark wood panel that blended seamlessly with the wall. Michael pressed a button and it slid open with a soft, pneumatic hiss. The CEO's office was breathtaking. It was a cavernous, sunlit space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the entire city. Below them, cars and people were tiny, moving specks. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, a sleek desk of polished glass, a few leather chairs. The CEO, a man with graying temples and an air of quiet authority, stood by the window, his back to them. He didn't turn immediately, as if he needed a moment to himself, to absorb the magnitude of what had just happened. When he finally turned, his face was a mix of exhaustion and profound relief. He was no longer the haggard, furious man on the screen. He looked at Caleb, then at Michael, and finally at Caleb's father. He walked towards them, his hands outstretched in a gesture of welcome. Michael explained everything, he said, his voice surprisingly soft. He stopped in front of Caleb and bent down slightly, bringing his eyes level with the boys. Caleb, I have a million questions for you, but only one is important right now. Thank you. You saved my company from a catastrophe. You saved countless jobs and millions of dollars. Caleb, still a little starstruck, managed to find his voice. I just saw a small mistake, sir. I've made it myself before when I was learning. The CEO smiled, a genuine, warm expression that erased the lines of stress from his face. That's what's so remarkable. You saw the forest for the trees. My best and brightest were looking for an obscure, complex failure, and you saw the simple, elegant solution. That's the mark of a true programmer. He straightened up and motioned for them to sit. They settled into the luxurious leather chairs. The CEO sat behind his desk, his hands clasped together, his gaze fixed on Caleb. Your friend Michael here tells me you're a remarkable young man, and that you have dreams of becoming a software engineer. Caleb nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. Well, the CEO said, a new seriousness in his tone. Actions like yours, Caleb, they don't go unrewarded. Vidian Dynamics will fund your education starting now. We'll establish a scholarship fund in your name that will cover all your academic expenses, all the way through college and even a master's degree should you choose to get one. Caleb and his father exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated shock. A scholarship that would cover everything? It was a dream they had never dared to voice. It was the answer to 1,000 sleepless nights and the weight of 1,000 financial worries. The CEO continued, his voice firm and clear. And that's not all. I want to make you a promise. A personal promise. You keep your grades up, you continue to grow your knowledge, and when you're ready, after you graduate, you have a job here. A direct hire. You won't need to interview. You will be a senior engineer, Michael's partner, in training. The door to Vidian Dynamics will always be open to you on one condition. You continue to be the same curious, brilliant, and humble young man you are today. Caleb's father, who had been silent for the entire meeting, finally spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. Sir, we don't know what to say. We can never thank you enough. The CEO waved a hand, a casual gesture that belied the monumental impact of his words. Your son already paid his debt and then some. This is merely Vidian Dynamics paying its own. The meeting concluded with a firm handshake and a promise from Michael to stay in touch. As they walked out of the office and back into the main lobby, the world looked different to Caleb. The building, which had seemed so imposing just hours before, now felt like a home, a place of possibility. The city outside, once a distant tapestry, felt more real, more tangible. It was his city, and his future was now firmly woven into its fabric. As they boarded the bus back home, the silence was no longer anxious, but filled with a quiet reverence. Caleb looked out the window, watching the blur of buildings and people. He thought about his old computer, the dusty keys, and the screen that had taught him to dream. Today, that dream had found its first real footing. The weight of the promise was immense, but it was a good weight, a challenge he was ready to face. He had a clear path, a future that was no longer a vague hope, but a concrete reality. And it all started with one small, forgotten line of code. The bus ride home was a quiet counterpoint to the city's ceaseless rhythm. Caleb sat by the window, the world outside a blur of motion, but inside, his mind was a single crystal-clear image. The CEO's face, the sincerity in his eyes, and the monumental promise that had been made. It was a weight both immense and exhilarating, a concrete plan where only a fragile dream had existed before. His father sat beside him, silent, a faint, almost bewildered smile on his face. The long-haul truck driver who had seen the whole country had just witnessed something far more improbable than any highway wonder. He had seen his son's destiny take its first true, unshakable step. When they arrived home, his mother was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She looked up, her face etched with the familiar weariness of a long day's work. But when she saw their faces, the exhaustion was instantly replaced by concern. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Caleb's father just smiled, a tear welling in his eye. "Caleb, you tell her." And so Caleb, in a voice that was both strong and trembling, recounted the events of the day, the sudden chaos, the moment he saw the error, the desperate plea, the CEO's approval, and the final, astonishing offer. His mother listened, her hands clutching the dish towel, her eyes wide. When he was done, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she let out a quiet sob and rushed to him, wrapping him in a hug so tight it felt like it was meant to hold him together forever. The tears on her face were not of sadness, but of pure, overflowing relief. For her, the promise was more than just a job. It was the end of a lifetime of financial worry, a beacon of light for their family's future, all brought forth by her son's quiet genius. The days that followed were a whirlwind of quiet change. A week later, a large package arrived at their doorstep. Inside, nestled in foam, was a brand-new top-of-the-line laptop, thin, powerful, and sleek, a world away from the beige tower he had rescued from the curb. The box also contained a handful of advanced programming textbooks, a gift card to an online tech bookstore, and a letter. It was from Michael Thompson. He had set up a personalized online learning curriculum and had arranged for a bi-weekly video call to mentor Caleb. The letter ended with a simple, encouraging line, "The world is now your oyster, Caleb. Go build your pearl." This was the beginning of Caleb's next phase. His old computer, a cherished relic, was retired to the corner of his room. His new laptop became his primary window to the world. He immersed himself in the curriculum Michael had provided, a structured path that took him far beyond the books he had been teaching himself from. He learned the nuances of object-oriented programming, delved into data structures and algorithms, and began to understand the complex architecture of large-scale systems. The video calls with Michael were invaluable. They weren't just about code, they were about mindset. Michael taught him to think like an engineer, to be a problem solver, to anticipate issues before they arose. He taught him the importance of clean, commented code and the value of collaboration in a profession that could sometimes feel solitary. As his knowledge grew, so did his ambition. He was no longer just building simple games or calculators, he was thinking about real-world applications. He saw his mother's meticulous, handwritten schedule for her nursing shifts and the fatigue in her face. He saw the complex, often stressful logistics of his father's trucking routes, the endless calculations of fuel, time, and distance. He wanted to build something for them, something that would not just ease their burdens, but also show them that their sacrifices had not been in vain. His first major project was a small, personalized logistics app for his father. He called it Route Compass. It was a simple desktop application that would take his father's destinations and automatically calculate the most efficient route, factoring in fuel stops and rest areas. He also added a feature that would track his father's hours on the road, a digital log that would replace the messy notebook his father carried. The code was complex and challenging, filled with API calls to mapping services and intricate algorithms. He hit roadblock after roadblock. He spent countless nights debugging, his brow furrowed in frustration. But each time he solved a problem, the quiet thrill of victory was sweeter than ever. When he finally showed the finished product to his father, the older man's eyes filled with pride. He watched as the app, with a few clicks, mapped out a week's worth of routes with an accuracy and speed that his old manual calculations could never match. It's incredible, son," his father said, his voice a soft murmur of wonder. "You built this? Just for me?" Caleb nodded. "It's just a small thing, Dad." But in his heart he knew it wasn't. It was his first real creation, a tangible testament to his journey. The scholarship fund was established, a quiet, almost invisible safety net that changed everything without changing anything. They still lived in the same apartment. His parents still worked their long hours. But the weight of their financial worries was lighter, replaced by a quiet hope. They knew that whatever lay ahead, high school, college, a master's degree, it was within Caleb's reach. The promise from Vidian Dynamics became his North Star, a guidepost for every decision he made. He studied harder not just for good grades, but to prove himself worthy of the trust placed in him. As the years passed, Caleb remained grounded. The local kid with the new laptop who could solve problems no one else could. He was the quiet genius of his middle school, the student who could explain complex algorithms with a simple clarity that even the teachers found impressive. But his feet remained firmly on the ground. He knew where he came from and he knew why he was doing this. He was building a new life not just for himself, but for the people who had given him everything. The end of middle school came with a new challenge, high school. With the prospect of a new school, new friends, and an even more demanding academic environment, Caleb was ready. He had spent the last 3 years not just learning to code but learning to build. He had built knowledge, he had built skill, and most importantly, he had built a foundation of unwavering purpose. He was no longer just a boy with a dream. He was a young man with a plan, a quiet architect of his own future. High school was a world of new magnitudes. The hallways of Northwood High were a river of faces Caleb didn't know, a chaotic symphony of lockers slamming, laughter, and 1,000 different conversations. It was an environment that, at first, felt overwhelming, a stark contrast to the small, intimate scale of his middle school. But Caleb, armed with the quiet confidence of a young man with a clear purpose, navigated it with a calm resolve. He found his way to the advanced placement classes, the computer lab, and the quiet corners of the library, the places where his world felt most familiar. His academic journey was a steady upward climb. He devoured advanced physics and calculus, seeing them not as abstract subjects but as the fundamental code of the universe. He was a natural fit for the school's robotics club, a small group of students who spent their afternoons building and programming complex machines. He wasn't the loudest or the most charismatic member, but he was the one everyone turned to when a program refused to compile or a sensor failed to read. He had a gift for seeing the invisible, for tracing the logical error in a jumble of code, a skill honed in the fire of a digital catastrophe years before. His bi-weekly video calls with Michael Thompson continued, a consistent thread in the fabric of his new life. Michael was more than just a mentor. He was a friend, a guide who understood the unique path Caleb was on. They would spend hours discussing complex topics, from the merits of different programming languages to the ethics of artificial intelligence. Michael would send Caleb coding challenges, real-world problems that pushed his knowledge beyond the classroom. It was through these challenges that Caleb honed his skills and learned to think like a professional. He was building his portfolio, each completed project another brick in the foundation of his future. One of his most significant projects was an open-source weather prediction model he worked on for a school science fair. It was a massive undertaking, requiring him to learn new libraries and handle large datasets. The program was a success, and it caught the attention of not only his teachers but a few local news outlets. He was interviewed for a short segment on the evening news, and for the first time he saw himself on a screen, a quiet, articulate teenager talking about his passion. He wasn't just the boy who fixed a problem. He was a young innovator in his own right. Life, however, wasn't just about code. High school brought its own set of challenges, some of them a stark reminder of the world beyond his digital sanctuary. There were moments of subtle, uncomfortable friction, conversations that would stop when he walked into a room, or dismissive comments about his focus on school and the nerdy things he did. He saw his intelligence and ambition sometimes misread as arrogance, and his quiet nature as an inability to connect. But he had a core group of friends, his fellow robotics and coding club members, who saw him for who he was. They were a motley crew of thinkers and builders, and in their company Caleb felt truly at home. The biggest challenge came in the form of a history class presentation. He was partnered with a popular student named David, a star athlete who had little interest in academics. Their topic was the civil rights movement. David insisted on a bare-bones presentation, a quick, uninspired summary to get a decent grade. But Caleb saw an opportunity to do something more. He proposed building an interactive timeline, a web application that would allow the class to explore the key events and figures of the movement, with embedded links to historical documents and video clips. It would require him to work on the design and programming, while David would be responsible for the research. David scoffed. "You're doing all that work for one class? We just need to get a B. Let's just use slides, man." Caleb, for the first time, pushed back. "It's not just about the grade, David. It's about the subject. This is important. We can make it interesting, not just something people sit through. I'll do most of the coding, you just help me with the research. It's a team effort." David reluctantly agreed, and for the next few weeks they worked side by side. David, initially unenthusiastic, found himself drawn into the project. Caleb's passion was contagious. He explained the logic behind the code, the intricate patterns of the digital design, and David, in turn, discovered a hidden love for uncovering historical facts and weaving them into a narrative. The night before the presentation, they were up late, putting the finishing touches on the app. David looked at Caleb, a new respect in his eyes. "Man," he said, shaking his head, "I had you all wrong. You're not just a nerd. You're a builder." Their presentation was a resounding success. The class was captivated, moving from screen to screen, interacting with the historical data in a way that felt immediate and personal. The teacher, an old veteran of the school, gave them an A and pulled Caleb aside after class. "That was brilliant, Caleb," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "You didn't just give them facts. You gave them a way to feel history. That's what a great mind does." As high school came to a close, Caleb's future felt more and more tangible. The scholarship fund had grown, a significant sum waiting for him at a top university. He had been accepted to every college he applied to, with his portfolio of projects and his impeccable grades speaking volumes. He chose to attend a prestigious university with a world-renowned computer science program, a place he knew would push him to the very limits of his ability. His parents were, by this point, accustomed to their son's quiet brilliance. Their pride was a deep, unwavering thing, and it was in their eyes every time they looked at him. They had worked their entire lives to give him a foundation, and now they were watching him build a skyscraper. He was no longer a boy with a dream. He was a young man on the verge of turning that dream into a reality, and the promise from Vidian Dynamics was waiting, a clear and welcoming light at the end of the tunnel. College was a different kind of crucible. The quiet, contained environment of high school gave way to the sprawling campus of a major university, a city within a city, buzzing with intellectual energy and a restless sense of ambition. Caleb, armed with his scholarship and a deep-seated sense of purpose, dove headfirst into the world of computer science. He found his rhythm quickly, not in the social whirl, but in the focused quiet of the late-night computer labs and the collaborative hum of study groups. His courses were a thrilling cascade of new knowledge. He studied advanced algorithms, the architecture of operating systems, and the complex art of machine learning. He found a new kind of satisfaction in solving problems that seemed impossibly difficult, the kind that required not just a logical mind but a creative one. The challenges Michael Thompson had sent him in high school had been an excellent primer, but here the problems were on a grander, more theoretical scale. He was learning not just how to build things, but why they worked the way they did, delving into the foundational principles that govern the digital world. His relationship with Michael evolved. Their bi-weekly video calls became less about mentorship and more about a shared passion. They would discuss the latest breakthroughs in the tech world, debate the future of artificial intelligence, and talk about the business side of software development. Michael became a bridge between Caleb's theoretical world of academia and the practical, fast-paced world of a tech company. He provided invaluable insights, guiding Caleb on what courses to take, what skills to prioritize, and what the industry was truly looking for. During his summers, Caleb didn't take a break. He pursued internships, but not in the traditional way. Michael had set him up with remote, paid projects at Vidian Dynamics, working on non-critical but challenging parts of the company's software. He worked on a small team, collaborating with experienced engineers. It was a baptism by fire. He learned about version control, project management, and the often messy reality of working with a large, complex code base that had been touched by many hands. One summer, he was tasked with optimizing a legacy system, a part of the company's software that was old, clunky, and riddled with inefficiencies. He spent weeks digging through lines of code written years ago, a digital archaeology project. He found a series of bottlenecks, small, seemingly insignificant inefficiencies that, when compounded, were slowing down the entire system. He spent his days in a quiet, focused state of flow, and his nights in the library, poring over textbooks, searching for a more elegant solution. The final result was a new algorithm that streamlined the process, cutting the system's processing time by a remarkable 30%. His code was clean, efficient, and well documented. It was a masterpiece, a silent testament to his growth. The feedback from the team was effusive. They were impressed not just with his technical skill but with his quiet dedication and his ability to work independently. They noted his professionalism and his calm under pressure. He was already fitting in not as an intern but as a valued member of the team. Academically, Caleb was a star. He graduated with a perfect grade point average, a long list of academic honors, and the respect of his professors. He had built not only his academic knowledge but also his professional portfolio. He had created applications, worked on open-source projects, and published research papers with his professors. He had done everything he was supposed to do and more. He was ready for the next step. The job application process for his classmates was a grueling gauntlet of interviews, coding challenges, and nervous waits. Caleb watched them with a quiet empathy. He saw their anxiety, their fear of failure, their desperate need to prove themselves. He knew he was in a privileged position. His was the only name that was not in a pile of resumes. He didn't have to prove himself, he had already done it. But he didn't rest on his laurels. He knew that the promise from the CEO was not a gift but a responsibility, and he intended to honor it. He filled out the online application for a software engineer position at Vidian Dynamics, the one his friends were all applying for. He included his resume, his portfolio, and a short cover letter. The letter was simple, a few lines of introduction and a brief mention of the promise. Within an hour, his phone rang. It was Michael. "I got your application," Michael said, a wide grin in his voice. "I just forwarded it to the CEO. He's been waiting for this." A week later, Caleb received a notification for a job interview. He knew it was a formality, but he prepared for it as if it were the most important meeting of his life. He wore a simple, well-fitting suit, his hands clasped together, his heart a steady, confident beat. He walked into the interview room, his mind sharp, his knowledge ready. The interview panel was a mix of senior engineers and HR representatives. They were kind and curious, but the questions were challenging, designed to test his limits. He answered each one with a quiet clarity, demonstrating not only his knowledge but also his passion for the work. The interview concluded with a final, unwritten question in the air. He had done everything they asked and more. He had proven his worth, not in a single remarkable moment, but in a lifetime of quiet dedication. The boy who had rescued a computer from the side of the road had now come full circle, standing on the precipice of his future. The interview panel sat in silence, their expressions unreadable as Caleb finished answering his last question. He had spoken with a calm confidence, not just reciting facts but articulating a deep-seated understanding of his craft. He had explained complex algorithms with a simple clarity that left them nodding in appreciation. They didn't need to ask for a portfolio, his work was already known. They had already seen the reports from Michael and the summer project managers, glowing with praise. They looked not at a candidate, but at a prodigy who had been a part of their company's story for years. The senior engineer at the head of the table closed his notebook. "Caleb," he said, his voice quiet, "I don't think we have any more questions for you. You are one of the most prepared and talented young engineers we've ever seen. We'll be in touch very soon." Caleb left the room and felt a wave of relief wash over him. He knew the interview was a formality, but the weight of it had still been immense. He walked out of the building and stepped onto the bustling city sidewalk. The world felt different than it had all those years ago. This wasn't a place of terrifying unknowns. It was a city he knew, a future he had helped build. He pulled out his phone and his thumb hovered over his mother's contact. He had told them he would call right after. He could hear the anxious excitement in her voice already. He found a quiet bench in a small park across the street from the building and dialed the number. His mother answered on the first ring. "Caleb? How did it go?" she asked, her voice tight with a hope she was trying to contain. "It went well, Mom," he said, a smile breaking across his face. "They didn't ask me many questions. They were already familiar with a lot of my work." A gasp of pure, unadulterated relief came from the other end of the line. He could hear his father in the background, a low murmur of a question. His mother put the phone on speaker. "You hear that, James? He did it," she said, her voice trembling. Did they say anything?" his father asked, his voice thick with emotion. "They said they'd be in touch soon," Caleb said. The three of them fell into a comfortable silence, a feeling of shared accomplishment that transcended words. His mother, he knew, was thinking about the endless shifts at the nursing home, the exhaustion that had become a constant companion. His father was remembering the long, lonely roads, the miles he had put on his body for his family. And Caleb, he was thinking of a dusty old computer, a gift of junk that had become a treasure, a symbol of a dream that was no longer just his own but theirs. The sacrifices, the long hours, the constant worry, it had all led to this moment. They had built this path together and he had simply walked it. "Son," his father said, his voice cracking slightly, "you've made us so proud. More than you know." Later that day his phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but Caleb knew who it was. He answered. The voice on the other end was familiar, deep, and filled with a quiet authority. "Caleb," the voice of the CEO said. "I just finished speaking with your interview panel. I heard you knocked it out of the park." "I tried my best, sir." "Your best is more than enough. I'm not even going to offer you a position. The position is already yours. The promise I made all those years ago, it wasn't a hollow one. Your grades are perfect, your technical skills are exactly what we look for, and your integrity is beyond reproach. You start next Monday. Welcome to Vidian Dynamics." The word Monday felt more real than any other word he had ever heard. The boy who had sat at a computer in a moment of panic was now a man with a future. He hung up the phone and sat there for a long moment, a quiet smile spreading across his face. He had done it. The following Monday morning, Caleb stood in the lobby of Vidian Dynamics. The building still felt monumental, a symbol of the tech world he had long admired. But this time he wasn't a guest. He was an employee. The security guard, a man he remembered from his first visit, simply nodded at him and motioned to the turnstile. He was expected. He was home. He walked past the front desk, the receptionist greeting him by name. He took the elevator up to the third floor, his stomach a mix of nerves and pure joy. When the doors opened, he was met with the familiar sight of the open-plan office. It was a symphony of quiet concentration and professional bustle. He saw the desks of the senior engineers, now occupied by the brilliant minds who had been absent on that fateful day. He saw Michael Thompson, his mentor, his friend who was now his colleague. He walked towards him, a wide smile on his face. Michael saw him and stood up, a genuine warm grin spreading across his face. "Welcome, Caleb," he said, clasping his hand. "I'm proud to have you on the team. You earned this." Caleb shook his hand. "Thank you, Michael. For everything." A few minutes later, the CEO's door opened and he walked out, his face calm and confident. He saw Caleb and smiled, a flash of genuine warmth in his eyes. He walked over and clapped a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I saw you standing there," the CEO said, his voice low and for Caleb's ears only. "And I remembered that little boy, the one with a quiet genius who saved my company. I knew you would honor your promise. Now you have a place to do what you were always meant to do. Build." Caleb was led to his new desk. It was near Michael's, a large, spacious area with 3 monitors and a comfortable, ergonomic chair. He sat down and his hands, which had trembled with both fear and excitement all those years ago, were now steady. He looked at the keyboard, at the lines of code that would soon fill the screen, and he felt a profound sense of peace. He had done it. He had built his own future. He had made his family proud. He was not just a software developer, he was an architect of dreams, and he was finally ready to build. Dear viewer, if you've watched up to this point, thank you for your support. I have a small request. If you enjoy my stories, you can subscribe to the channel, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts about the stories in the comments. Enjoy watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.